Hello, welcome to the technology stage on the last day of RNS. I can't believe it. I can't believe we are here. If you were here during our introduction this morning, Stephen was saying is that it kind of feels like the last day of summer camp, and that's been certainly true for me. I feel like I'm mourning the end of it, but we are not done yet. We have an incredible day, and I am so excited about this session. We are going to have an incredible conversation here. We are going to be chatting about volunteer mobilization. Not only are we going to be talking about it, we are going to be joined by my incredible guest, someone who is on the front lines, who is doing volunteer mobilization and who is doing it incredibly well. Volunteer mobilization is, I think, so beautiful and so important. It's such a cool way to get to have supporters engaged with your organization. It's a cool way to further your mission, to have that people power behind your organization, but it can also be a challenge. It can be I think emotionally draining. My husband does some volunteer management as a volunteer himself, and I know that he sometimes is a little disheartened by it, but it also can just be a logistical nightmare, which I know Caitlyn, our guest, is fully aware of all of this and is going to be talking about that as well. So if we're talking about volunteer mobilization, we're actually going to be very specifically talking about how Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association mobilized 2,100 volunteers with Virtuous Volunteer. One thing to note with that title, you'll see that MOFGA is in there as the acronym, and we definitely will be using MOFGA more than saying that whole title, so just be aware of that. And Virtuous Volunteer was also previously known as VOMO, so you might hear those interchanged as well. Just want to say that on top, just to make sure everyone knows what's going on. But Caitlyn, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do and tell us a little bit about MOFGA.
Sure, great, thank you. Thanks for having me. So my name is Caitlyn Barker. I am located in Maine. I work for the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, as Jen said, known as MOFGA. We are a small organization. We have less than 50 employees, but we are the oldest and largest state organic organization in the country. So we educate about and advocate for organic agriculture through classes and workshops. We do policy work at the state and federal level. And we certify farms and producers across the Northeast as organic. And we also hold our largest event, which is the Common Ground Country Fair, held every September. And we're entering our 46th year. We had our record year last year with over 67,000 attendees. And that event is largely volunteer powered. So we have over 2,000 volunteers, the majority who are serving 1 or more 4-hour shifts. And we have over 300 who are higher level volunteers who are managing different areas of the fair and working directly with volunteers.
Awesome. I love hearing about that every time we chat, that you guys have done this for so long, it's so big, and you manage it, which I think is just incredible. So definitely not the star of the show here, but I'll introduce myself. My name is Jen Holcomb. I'm the product marketing specialist here at Virtuous. If you've been hanging out with us at the technology stage this week, you have become very familiar with my phenomenal boss, Kelly Cristaldi, who has been hanging out here, and I will do my best to match the standard of excellence that she has set, but she set the bar high. But you guys get to hang out with me today because I do work with our Virtuous Volunteer VOMO product, and that is how I originally actually met Caitlyn. So I'm just gonna hype you up for a second here, Caitlyn, before I let you take it away. I recently had the chance to chat with Caitlyn just to hear about how she uses Virtuous Volunteer, what her experience is, and we absolutely had that conversation, but I actually walked away from it really inspired. I think you might be one of the most intuitively responsive people I've ever had the chance to talk with. The way that you do volunteer management, the way that you think about this as a really holistic thing as an organization, and how can you think about all the different ways people are engaging with you, was just naturally responsive. And I just was so excited about it and talked about it so much that finally Kelly was like, do you want to see if she could come to RNS? And I was like, oh my goodness, that would be the best session ever. And I'm so grateful that you said yes and that we are here. So I am going to let you take it away. And I just want to say we kind of have a game plan here, but we want this to be conversational. We want it to be interactive. So I will be keeping an eye on the chat, dropping any questions, and I will definitely bring those up. But Caitlyn, I'm going to pop it over to the kind of overview slide and let you take it from here.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Really kind things. Thank you that you said. So when Jen and I were chatting about some of the key things we want to focus on in this talk, these were kind of the 4 top items that we want to hit on. So the first is volunteer resources, and we can actually go to that next slide and talk about how we use Virtuous Volunteer to really maximize our volunteer opportunities. So volunteer opportunities, in my experience, really need to be easy for our volunteers to discover. So that means we need a platform that's user-friendly. We need the opportunity to learn about it in multiple places. And so at MOFGA, we communicate our hub, which is the homepage for our MOFGA volunteer page. You can see it right up there. That's a screenshot. And that hub highlights those initiatives. So the initiatives is the umbrella term for those projects that we organize our volunteer opportunities into. So we have various categories right now. The one on the right is the Common Ground Country Fair, and that actually, June 1st is when our shifts for that will go live. We have thousands of shifts that will be posted there. But this is a really appealing and engaging hub so that people can see. They're immediately drawn in by the graphics, which you can customize, and then they can click on those and go into the opportunities to learn more about them. So we communicate this link to the hub through a weekly email bulletin. We use it in all our social media, our mailings, our in-person events. Virtuous Volunteer has a great QR code tool that we use, and you can customize that as well to determine what webpage you want it to go to, and we'll print that on cards to hand out at in-person events. And when we're communicating that widely, we also communicate it ahead of events. So for example, we have a volunteer event happening this weekend. We did a social post linking to the Virtuous Volunteer Hub. We sent it in our weekly bulletin, which reaches over 40,000 email subscribers. And it's just constantly in our communication, so it becomes a regular part of MOFGA, and people know intuitively to go there. We also have it posted on our website, and as the fair gets closer in September, we'll highlight it often in the different areas of the fair. So one really important thing to consider, and that I've noticed working with volunteers over the last few years, is that the more information you can provide, the more likely you're going to be to have a volunteer sign up and show up for a volunteer opportunity. So Virtuous Volunteer has this great feature, these landing pages for each opportunity. This is a screenshot of kind of the middle of one. What you don't see is an image above that you can customize. So for every area, I'll take the fair as an example. The fair has like dozens of different areas. So we have a country store, we have a kitchen, we have a children's area, we have the gates. We have all these different areas. So the fair is one initiative, excuse me, and all the opportunities within it have their own landing pages. And on that landing page, I can do an extensive description of the area, which people love. They want to know what to expect, and they want to know what's expected of them. I can include the time, date, location. There's a map feature on the side. I can include any age minimums. I can include the different shifts. So below the description, there are all the shifts for the area. So for example, if I was talking about the country store, it would be each shift listed out, and you can also do a description of the role for each shift, which is really key because within our different areas, we often have different roles that we need volunteers to fill. And rather than trying to determine when volunteers show up, who's going to do what, you have it all mapped out. So for the store, we'll have cashiers, we'll have product stockers, we'll have crowd control, and all of those things can be labeled in the roles, and people can sign up for exactly the role they want. So it's really specific, and it really gives people that peace of mind to know exactly what they're signing up for. I think it's a huge, really important piece of Virtuous Volunteer. I just want to jump down. One of the other thing that's great about the projects and the different pages is that you can delegate the work. So I manage Virtuous Volunteer, but it would be way too much for me to try to manage every single area of the fair, for example. And you can create ownership of different projects. So for the country store, I might make a coworker or a high-level volunteer an owner of the project. They can then access the back end of Virtuous Volunteer. They can check on their shifts, see how many people have signed up. They can communicate directly with those volunteers. Their contact information is there. They can adjust the shift times, the description, the location, whatever needs to happen. They have ownership of that project, and it's a very easy transfer. I think I did a 10-minute screen share with a few volunteers last year to talk about how to access the back end and what it looks like. It's super user-friendly. And they caught on quickly, and I'm always available to answer questions, but it's really helpful in a way for people to take ownership of their volunteer area and have some autonomy in how they decide it's going to run.
Yeah, I love that. And one story I would love for you to share, I might be jumping the gun, it might come up later, but it's just such a good story that I think kind of shows this like before and after, both making your life easier, but also creating a better volunteer experience. Because that's, like what we're here for with volunteer mobilization. If your volunteer experience is kind of terrible, you're not going to volunteer again. You're probably not going to donate again. So do you mind sharing the story of, so at your fair, you have 10,000 volunteer shifts and you have volunteers checking in the volunteers for those shifts, kind of the like before and after, how you used to do it and how it is now that you have some new tools in place to make that a little bit better for your volunteers.
Sure, yeah, this is a game changer. So at our fair, we have 2 different gates, a north and a south gate, and we have a team of volunteers at each checking in the thousands of volunteers coming in. So it is a busy place where they need to be able to quickly access the volunteer's name, contact information, the shift, answer questions about where they're going. And in the past, this was managed in binders, just binders and binders of paper that we're trying to organize alphabetically or by date and by area, and it is kind of a logistical nightmare. And with Virtuous Volunteer, it's so streamlined. So we've got kiosks set up. We have updated our Wi-Fi so that each gate has Wi-Fi access. So we have laptops set up for volunteers to access the back end if they need to of Virtuous Volunteer. We've got iPads set up as kiosks. People can check in and self-select what area and their name and go for it, or they can ask for help and have a volunteer help them check in. But it's so much quicker. It gives people the opportunity to also see what other areas still need volunteers. So our volunteer check-in tent crew can look on the back end of Virtuous Volunteer, see what areas are low on volunteers, and sign someone up right then, day of, for a shift. It's amazing. The change has been great. And I've gotten great feedback from the teams at both gates.
Good. Yeah, we absolutely love to hear that. And of course, we believe in Virtuous Volunteer here, no surprise. But I think regardless of the tool that you're using, just the fact that you guys were thinking about how can we make this better, how can we improve this experience, goes towards this question about volunteer mobilization. You want to create a volunteer experience. Yes, they're working. People know that when they're volunteering, but you want it to still be good. You want it to be easy. You want it to not be a frustrating experience. And I think that story really exemplifies that kind of mentality there. A quick question I'm seeing here in the chat asking about volunteer waivers and how do you manage that virtually?
Yeah, so Virtuous Volunteer has a function where you can upload documents for people to acknowledge and sign. We have our volunteer guidelines when people first sign up and create an account that they view and then acknowledge that they've read and agreed to them, and that's one option. And then within the individual landing pages, you can also upload any relevant documents. So we have a waiver or a parental consent form for underage volunteers. We allow adolescents 13 and up to volunteer on their own if they have parental consent, and those under 13 need to have an adult with them to volunteer. But Virtuous Volunteer makes it really easy to include all the necessary paperwork right in the registration process, so we're not dealing with that either.
Yeah, and there's another question I see with background checks, and that is also a part of that. We have some partnerships with some background check companies, and you can automate that as a part of using Virtuous Volunteer. And I'll say this again at the end too, but I just want to kind of plug it now. In the next session, at, I think it's 10:05, we actually have a member of our team doing a demo of Virtuous Volunteer. I think the title is VOMO in our platform, but VOMO, Virtuous Volunteer. So we can definitely answer some questions now, but if you want to actually see it in action, which I think is the best way to learn, check out that session as well, and you can actually see how it looks in Virtuous Volunteer. Yeah, so really quick, one other question too about the check-in at the kiosk, because that quick, what's that experience like for the volunteers?
Yeah, so it's very quick. They basically walk up, they choose, it's automatically showing the volunteer opportunities for that day. So they click on I'm trying to remember because I haven't checked in since last fall, but I think it's either their name. I think they click on the area, or the initiative or project.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get
I know we just changed some of the terms, and now I can't remember either. But yeah, it lists the volunteer opportunity.
I think it's the opportunity. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so they can click on the opportunity and then find their name in the list and just click, and it's a real quick check-in. That's it. That's all they need to do. So
awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to communications.
Sure. So Virtuous Volunteer makes it really easy to communicate with your volunteers, and I find myself using some of the features regularly. In fact, like this afternoon, I have a scheduled email to send out to a group who have registered to volunteer this Saturday at that project that I mentioned, just with a couple of reminders that I didn't put in the description. So you can you can communicate a few different ways. So one really easy, quick way is if you have an announcement, throw it up as a banner on your hub. So the banner goes across the top. You can put a link in the banner. You can make it a little button, whatever you want to do, or just have an announcement at the top. And that's like a generalized way to do it. I'll put an announcement in June when the shifts go live, just welcoming everybody and saying scroll through and check out all the opportunities that are there or something like that. I can also connect directly with a group. So Virtuous Volunteer has a way to organize volunteers into groups. So for the fair, I have a lot of businesses, organizations, and school groups who want to volunteer together. So when they want to volunteer, I will have them sign up and create themselves an account, but also I will group them. So I'll group them by school or by business, and then I can go into that individual group and email the whole group about an upcoming opportunity. And we have groups who volunteer throughout the year as well. A lot of community service is done at our organization, so schools will come or businesses will come. And this is a great way to target that communication directly to those groups. I can also email the whole group if I really need to. All their contact info is in there. I try not to do this often. I don't want to abuse their confidence with the information that we hold. But we are having a big volunteer appreciation event happening in mid-June. And I wanted to make sure everybody got an invite. So I did pull all the contact information and send out an invite to everybody. So there are various ways to do it. The other thing is we adopted the Virtuous CRM. So we are fully integrated with the Virtuous CRM and Virtuous Volunteers. And now I can go in and look at any contact or do a query to pull volunteers from that Virtuous contact info. And I can see not only their communication history, their giving history, their volunteer history. It's created this whole profile. It's pretty exciting on MOFGA's end to be able to start to really craft this holistic perspective on our community in different ways.
Yeah, we talk a lot about being responsive about, omni-channel marketing of how do your supporters want to be contacted and how can you do that? And I think that's something that I really love about the hub is it's this channel that we don't talk about too much. It's you can put that message there, you can put all of the information there, and it is a communication channel. So I really love that you mentioned that as something of, hey, here's an announcement, here's a big thing coming up. Along with, let's send some emails, let's, maybe send some SMSs to people who've opted in or whatever it may be. So yeah, I really love that. Anything else you want to say about communication before we move on to the next one?
You just reminded me, one quick thing about the hub is that you can customize what initiatives are listed. So I just posted the Common Ground Fair image at the top, even though there's no shifts under, so that when people are visiting, it's kind of in their mind that the fair shifts are going to be listed soon. But I'll pull that off after the share and replace it with some of our in-person events that are happening that we need volunteers for. We have orchard projects or grounds projects or different projects in southern Maine because we're in central Maine right now. So it is nice to be able to customize that display so it changes and people can see what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, it's all about being responsive. It's about making sure they have the information. I feel like that's such a big part about volunteer mobilization that I've seen as a volunteer myself, and that knowing how to volunteer and knowing what's coming, there's kind of a coordination thing on the volunteer's part. I may want to volunteer, but I find out too late or whatever it be. So having all of those I think is really great. It's giving people a heads up early, and it's just staying on top of their mind, which is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, coming from the perspective of someone who has volunteered here and there, and actually some of my first volunteering was with MOFGA as a teen, but someone who really is an introvert and needs information to feel comfortable, Virtuous Volunteer gives me a lot of opportunities to really meet that need, because people learn and feel comfortable in different ways, obviously. And I feel like the more information I can give them and the more comfortable I can make them feel, the more likely they're going to engage and join us and be repeat volunteers too.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is what I said. You're just intuitively responsive. You're not centering what you guys need at MOFGA. You're centering your volunteers and how you can put them in a situation where they're excited to engage, which I think is just incredible and so thoughtful. So yeah, let's chat about relationships. I think that's the perfect segue to this.
Sure. This is one of my favorite slides. So I feel like being a community engagement coordinator is more about relationships than numbers and data and opportunities and things like that. So it requires some observation. And so what it means is I'm constantly looking for ways to further engage volunteers, and I'm looking for opportunities to invite them into leadership. And I'm not talking about traditional leadership. I'm looking for people who are excited to be there, who have thoughtful reflection and feedback for their experience so we can further customize it for them, who are creative, who are good at communicating. So I'm getting to know my volunteers, and I know that that can be a lot, but coming from an organization that works with over 2,000 volunteers, yes, I'm not going to get to know all of them by any means, but I am going to put a lot of effort into learning about what parts of volunteering they like, thinking about ways I can connect them to other opportunities, not only in volunteering, but in other events that MOFGA is hosting. We do a lot of workshops and classes. We have an online and in-person store. We do a lot of advocacy, like I mentioned. So it's a lot about cultivating relationships and then creating opportunities for connection. I think volunteers, when you think about why people volunteer, it's often someone looking for meaningful connection, whether that be with people or the work they're doing. And I think we need to center that instead of seeing volunteers as an asset that we just need to grow and grow. We need to cultivate those authentic relationships, and that automatically leads to more engagement, whether it be at other volunteer events or taking part in educational opportunities or going down the donor pathway. It's really important to think about these volunteers as people and then think creatively about ways to engage them.
Yeah, and you told me a story, I think one time when we met, about a volunteer that you did set aside time to meet with face-to-face, and I'd love for you to share that story about like why you met with that person and what the impact of that was, because I thought that was a really powerful story about just being responsive and knowing who they were and making the right suggestion for what they could be doing next to be more engaged with you all at MOFGA.
Sure, yeah, we have, like I mentioned, we have a lot of projects happening throughout the year, and sometimes they involve our commercial kitchen, whether it be workshops for preserving or cooking food or volunteer. I mean, we've had some for just general cleaning, especially after the pandemic and things had been shut down for a while. And this volunteer, repeatedly, I saw his name on a kitchen shift. So whether it be for prepping things in the kitchen or cleaning the kitchen, he kept coming back to the kitchen. And so one day when I knew he was coming in for a project, I made sure I was in the office that day and checked in with him and just asked him how it was going and what he liked about volunteering, and realized like this person clearly enjoys working in a kitchen setting, maybe with food. And so we got into a conversation about that. And he was just telling me a little bit about his history and how much he loves cooking. And I threw out the idea of him taking on a higher level volunteer role at the fair, working with food at the fair in one of our areas. And he was really excited about it. And so it's actually, for anyone who's ever been to the fair knows, this is a classic New England thing. Bean hole beans, which is actually, you literally dig a hole in the ground, you start a fire, and you cook beans in a big kettle underground. It's a traditional New England thing. So we offer that at the fair, and he was so excited to take over that area and look up the recipe and take charge of any volunteers and work with them who might be working in the bean hole beans area. So it's that kind of noticing, so keeping an eye out for volunteers who are repeat volunteers, maybe in one area, and then thinking about how that interest might transfer somewhere else. And Virtuous Volunteer is really helpful in that I can go into past years, for example, and see someone who maybe did 3 shifts in our compost and recycling. We're working towards being a zero waste fair. So the compost and recycling area is a huge part of our fair. And see someone who's worked there multiple times and reach out to them and say, are you interested in taking more of a leadership position in the compost and recycling area? Here are the opportunities that exist. Here's what the shift involves. Here's the team you would be working for. And you let me know. I can connect you. I can facilitate that, but really leaving it up to them whether they want to engage or not. But it's having that awareness, and Virtuous Volunteer creates those opportunities with plenty of data to back that up.
Yeah, imagine if you had done like a more traditional approach and just said, here's our greatest need for volunteering. Here's someone who volunteers a lot. Let's have him do that. He might have done it. He probably would have been enthusiastic somewhat because he's clearly engaged with you all. But by really listening to what he was interested in and making that very specific suggestion, you were able to get like a very engaged, very enthusiastic volunteer who I'm sure is going to continue the relationship with you guys just more and more over the coming years, which I think just shows the impact of that responsiveness and of the value of that kind of mindset. I think it takes a little bit more work maybe for you guys, but the payoff is just so magnificent that it's absolutely worth it. From all these stories from you, I just love hearing them so much. They're so great. Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to add about relationships before we go on to, I know you love the relationship slide. I think the next one's my favorite slide. The way you talk about it, oh, I'm so excited.
No, go ahead. Go for it. We can move on.
Let's talk about this holistic perspective, which I think is important and valuable, and I think you have a really unique take on it because you are coming from this kind of volunteer side of things, which is something we are talking more and more about in the world of responsiveness, but you are coming at it from, again, intuitively responsive mindset. But I think you have a lot of good stories and examples of how you are doing all of this in the context, the wider context of your organization. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts here.
Sure. So when we first started talking a few years ago about how to grow engagement through volunteering and through other engagement opportunities, a kind of corporate vision of the engagement funnel kind of surfaced. And we thought, okay, well, we can work with this. And immediately it became apparent like this was not the model that was going to work for us. What is working for us is considering these pathways of engagement and understanding that they are never going to be linear. And that's just not the way life works. Like, things are not linear in our experiences. We connect in various ways. And we're looking to mimic that in our engagement across the organization, not just with volunteering. So we're mapping out the ways that, yes, volunteering can lead to other engagement, but other engagement opportunities within our organization can also lead to volunteering. So a volunteer might take on additional volunteering, or maybe sign up for our newsletter, or maybe take a class, or maybe become a donor. And also a donor might decide to take a class with us or start volunteering at our our workshops or whatever other events we're having. And we're looking to map out these pathways to grow that engagement and meet our community where they are. So rather than forcing something to lead to something to lead to something, it's more about here's where our community member is, where can we commit, can we engage with them, and where could that lead? So it's a convoluted map. It doesn't necessarily make sense. It's messy, but it reflects real life in that we want to provide multiple opportunities and have people engage in multiple ways. And organically, it's going to lead to more donors, but it's also going to lead to more advocates in our community for a fair food system, which is what we're working towards. And it's going to lead to more education in our community that's going to spread from there. So it's definitely a holistic view, but if we focus too much on just donors or just getting one thing, it doesn't work. And we've seen that. So we really want to view and see our community as a wide range of opportunities, and then reflect that in the strategies that we employ from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, man, it was either yesterday or Tuesday. It is blurring together, but it's been the best week ever. We were talking a little bit about omni-channel communication. Again, kind of brought this up earlier, but someone said something to the effect of, you wouldn't talk to your friends in just one channel So why are you talking to your donors that way? You're not going to only email your friends. You're going to kind of talk to them in whatever makes sense. And I feel like what you're saying about that donor engagement is true. You would never go to your friends and say, well, I've mapped out the way I want our friendship to grow. So if you could just move from step A to B to C, that would be super ideal for me. You know, it's more organic. Yeah, it's messy, but relationships are messy. And I think that's what being responsive is all about, is embracing that a little bit. And I think so many cool things, like the stories you've already shared, come out of those, taking this approach with things. And you also do find more authenticity, more genuine relationships that do pay off more long term, which is just talking about the multiple channels there. So you want to talk about how you guys are doing that, creating opportunities through multiple channels a little bit more?
I can, yeah. I don't want to forget to talk about the economic impact tool, because that's a big one.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so the opportunities through different channels, it's basically, I'm looking through this. So we're utilizing Virtuous Volunteer and the Virtuous CRM to, like I said, create this larger vision of our community. So we can connect through these volunteer opportunities, but I can also see that someone signed up for our low impact forestry newsletter and maybe might be interested in this policy newsletter that has to do with low impact forestry. And also we have a donor event coming up that involves our low impact forestry coordinator or something like that. So the Virtuous CRM is so helpful, especially now that it's integrated at our organization with Virtuous Volunteer. It's so helpful to create this profile that then gives us multiple opportunities to engage with our community, whether it be through donor organizations or an email list, or we have a brick and mortar store in Freeport, Maine, for anyone who's ever come to Maine, southern Maine. And we love having people visit us there, where they can purchase MOFGA products or products by other artisans in Maine. If they can sign up for our newsletter, if they can follow us on our socials. Like, there's so many different ways, and the more information we have, the more we can pinpoint and target those communications and segment out people who attended one event. Do a query in the CRM, and we can pull those people and connect them with an upcoming event or donor event or volunteer opportunity that aligns with that. So it further creates these opportunities to get it exactly right, hopefully, or as close to it as we can, to really hit the nail on the head and target those audiences and give them information that they might find really valuable.
I think that was the quote that blew my mind the most the first time we talked, that I was just telling everyone at Virtuous. I'm like, you guys, she just naturally said, the more information you have, the better relationships you can build. Like, she just said that, and it's the best sentence ever, and I love it so much. So I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that's so true. And then, yeah, I'd love for you to talk about the total economic impact. I think that's a really cool thing that we do with Virtuous Volunteer, and I know it's been pretty impactful for you over at MOFGA.
Yeah, it really has. It is a way to tangibly measure the economic impact that volunteers bring to your organizations. And so, yes, me working with volunteers day to day, I see that impact played out every day. But I want to be able to bring that information to the board. I want to be able to bring it to the public and to our donors, and to say, look at this huge amount, and really advocate for the work that our volunteers do and bring to our organization. Like I said, for the fair, over 2,000 volunteers. That fair is volunteer powered. It is not a fundraiser for us. It is a community engagement opportunity to create opportunities for connection, learning, advocacy, entertainment. It's this opportunity to really bring our community together, and we could not do it without these volunteers. So having this economic impact tool that I can bring to a board meeting and say, yes, this fair is valuable, and this fair could not be done without these volunteers, and we need to continue to engage, support, appreciate, do everything we can to let these volunteers know the value and the importance they bring to our organization.
Yeah, and I'm curious, what's the effect of that been? Have you seen greater buy-in across the organization on, the value of volunteers, or what's that looked like for you since you have that number and you've been able to use that internally in conversations more?
Yeah, honestly, internally, people are not that surprised, because the culture of MOFGA is so appreciative of volunteers. We were a grassroots organization formed over 50 years ago. The fair started 46 years ago. So we have this history of being powered by really supportive community. But when you start bringing in the numbers, it's kind of mind-blowing. And then when you start bringing it outside your organization to people who aren't aware of how important the role that volunteers play at MOFGA is, it is amazing. It's really hugely impactful, and it really represents the value that people bring to an organization. And it's not just monetary. Like, that is a great thing to be able to look and say, we have over $400,000 of economic impact in just 2022 brought to us by volunteers. Like, that's amazing. But bringing more volunteers in also brings new perspective. It brings new experiences. It brings new skills, and you enrich your organization by expanding that volunteer base. So Virtuous Volunteer has been this amazing tool to really expand what we had going already, but what we really needed to be streamlined and have opportunities to grow. And it's been that tool that we needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we have any questions, I have a couple of questions I kind of want to ask you, but if anyone has any, pop those in there. But one thing I want to ask, something I hear a lot as I talk to volunteer coordinators, there's a question that comes up a lot of, how, we've talked about creating a good volunteer experience, all of that, but how do you guys get volunteers in the door in the first place? I know you guys are an older organization, a very impactful organization, so there may just be some history there. But what are some efforts you do to get volunteer acquisition? I guess is kind of my question there.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something we're always thinking about. So there's a few different strategies we utilize. I do a lot of outreach to schools, higher ed, universities and colleges, and businesses within a certain radius to let them know of the volunteer opportunities, how I can help them engage, what it would look like, and the help we need. So there's a lot of that outreach. Then there's a lot of that leadership facilitation. And we do that in a kind of apprentice program within our planning team. So our planning team is those 300 volunteers who are higher level volunteers. They're engaged throughout the year. They're managing different areas of the fair, and they're working with those 4-hour shift volunteers. And we work with those planning team members to help them identify those volunteers who seem particularly interested in an area, seem like they want to do a little more, get more involved. And those volunteers are passed on to me. I use Virtuous Volunteer to find their information, and then I reach out directly through either an email or phone call to let them know that we noticed how excited you were, and we're interested in offering you some opportunities if you'd like to join in. So there's a lot of hands-on and relationship building at different levels throughout the whole process.
Awesome, I love that. We have another question here. What was your process for launching VOMO to your existing volunteers, and how has it helped your volunteer base grow over the years? Kind of with that, how long did it take you guys to get to that 2,000 volunteer mark?
Yeah, so the way we launched it, we did a big social media blitz. We used our bulletin, our weekly bulletin, to throw out the information. But I also hosted a couple live webinars to go over the software, do a screen share, show people how it works, and then recorded and uploaded one of those to the website. And then did a FAQ. So lots of opportunities for people to learn about it. I still occasionally get someone who hasn't used it before, and I just direct them to the tutorial video. And what was the other part of the question? I just forgot.
How long did it take you all how's it helped your volunteer base grow, and how long did it take you to get to 2,000 volunteers?
Well, I mean, we're kind of in the minority in that we have this gigantic event every fall that needs volunteers. So they quickly we've only had it in place for 2 years, and we've only had one in-person fair because in 2021 we had to cancel the fair due to rising rates of COVID-19. So we've just had the one in-person fair, but as soon as people were interested in volunteering at the fair, they were connected with that Virtuous Volunteer information. So that was forefront. It was basically plastered all over. It was on handouts, it was on our website, it was on our, we have a monthly radio show that we talked about it on. So it was everywhere, and people just signed up, and I anticipate it's gonna grow significantly over the next few years as we continue to use it and continue to expand our outreach.
Awesome. One other question I pre-sourced for this was kind of just an internal question for you all. How did you guys handle, so you recently came on, within the last couple of years, you implemented VOMO, and then, the Virtuous CRM. Just kind of curious about the change management process for you and your team, just internally. I know change is just objectively hard for anyone, but a new software at a nonprofit is always a unique challenge. What was that like for you guys, and do you have any advice for anyone who, regardless of where they're going, are considering implementing a new software and things that they should maybe be thinking about at this point in the process?
Yeah, it was relatively seamless, actually. So the customer service has been great, and I'm not like I don't work for Virtuous Volunteer, but I will say
I know everyone's going to think you're a plant. I swear she's not. This is her honest opinion.
No, I'm up in central Maine. It's beautiful, but this is my first presentation kind of thing like this. I'm going back to my regular work as soon as this is done. So the customer service is great. Like having the one-on-one meetings with the rep who's managing our account has been great. They've been working directly with our database manager, and then our database manager has been holding sessions with different teams to give them kind of a tutorial on what aspects they'll be using, and then also sending out communications regularly about updates, new features, things that are like when VOMO and Virtuous became fully integrated, like what we could do with that then. So like having a point person and then having that point person able to disseminate that information to staff and work with us, answer questions. It was a process, but so far the feedback I'm hearing from the different teams is that it's really exciting and it's going well. So
awesome.
The other thing I will add, Virtuous, if we have 1 second, has been really receptive to our feedback, which has been really exciting to be able to play with some of the different things, see what we might like, send it back to Virtuous, and then get feedback. And some things have changed because of that. So it's been really great.
Yeah, this is just a personal anecdote that I'm going to share, and it's a true story. When I was interviewing at Virtuous, I got to meet with our head of product. And one of the things that made me agree to take the job is he said that he thought nonprofits deserve the same quality of technology as for-profits, and that was his goal here. And I was sold to work here, and so that's something that we definitely value and I think is really important, that you guys are doing incredible things in the world, and that means you deserve incredible software, which means it needs to be updated, it needs to be improved, and we care about how our customers are using it, and we are being responsive as software as well as encouraging responsive fundraising. So we have one more question here that I actually would love for you to answer, Caitlyn, just from the customer perspective. Someone came in a little bit late, no problem, but talking about the hub a little bit. So is volunteer management, how is that visible to public? Short answer is yes, but Caitlyn, do you just want to talk really quick about just the process of creating a volunteer opportunity, putting it on the hub, just
Sure.
How easy is that for you, all of that. I think that'd be a great story to hear.
Yeah, it's super easy, super user-friendly. I have a lot of coworkers who come and say, I have this volunteer opportunity coming up and I need this many people, what do I do? And I can just say, tell me the location, give me a little description, how many people you want in the time frame, and I create it and post it. So it has a template already made. I can throw an image in there. I can put a description. I can put the shifts. It's very easy to add the dates, times, how many people per shift, and a short description of each role. I think that's it, the location, time, and then you just click post and it's there. You can visit the opportunity page, grab the link, throw it on your socials. You can put the initiative right on the homepage. So for example, like the fair initiative is there, they click on it and they can go in and see all the opportunities and click into each landing page. It is super user-friendly. I don't work in technology. I've never worked in technology. I can figure things out, but I am not an expert and I have had no problem with it. And I will say, I mentioned this before, we have a lot of volunteers in our community who are older and who aren't as comfortable with new technology. And I have heard very little negative feedback. It's really user-friendly. It's intuitive. Again, I don't work for Virtuous, but I've been really happy with the interaction and the way that our community has been able to utilize it with no problem whatsoever. So.
Yeah. One of my favorite things, so I have done some volunteer work doing social media for a local bike advocacy organization in my hometown, and it always kind of drove me nuts. They just had the calendar for volunteer activities or events, and it was so hard for me as a volunteer to know what was coming up so that I could post about it on social media. And so I think that the way that we have it kind of organized, yes, you can see a calendar view, you can know the dates, but I think it's just a little bit easier. You can see the information. So as a volunteer on my end, that was something I was like, oh, this would be actually really nice.
Yeah, our social media manager will often just pull from VOMO, Virtuous Volunteer, the image that I used and the little description, and it's one less step for someone in terms of content building for social media.
Yeah. And so we have some more additional questions about Virtuous Volunteer, which I am going to use to segue here a little bit into the closing. So we actually have coming up at 10:05, I think it's 10:05, a VOMO demo from a member of our team here at Virtuous. And so feel free to join that if you have some additional questions about how this software works. Again, I swear Caitlyn is not a plant. We are not paying her to say nice things. We are just having her share her experience. So if you want to check that out, feel free to join at 10:05. I think it's on the demo stage. And you can see Virtuous Volunteer in action. You can ask some questions and get all of that answered. I think it's so nice to see it. It really is a visual tool, and so it's just even better to see it and not just screenshots, but interact with someone actually using it. So absolutely check that out. Here is Caitlyn's information. Feel free to connect with either of us, reach out to either of us. I'm actually realizing, I don't know if you and I are even connected on LinkedIn, Caitlyn, so I will be doing that after this session. And then here is my information. If you have more questions about Virtuous, if you just want to connect, again, please feel free to reach out to me as well. Caitlyn, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I feel like this is one of those sessions that was incredible to be in, but we are going to be using the recording of this for time to come because it's just been so good. You say so many great things, and I'm so grateful for you to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jen. This was fun.
Awesome. All right, well, we are going to be taking about a 10-minute break. We have some more great stuff coming up at 10:05, so check that out, and we will see you soon.